Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been on, well, quite a journey, haven't we? Exploring these fundamental forces in the soul.
We have fire, air, water.
hmm
We've covered a lot of ground.
Exactly. And we've looked at how they, shape who we are, but there's one left.
That's right. And for this deep dive, looking at the source material you shared, we're really focusing now on the fourth element, Earth. The source refers to it as
Earth.
Mhm.
Okay, so what's the game plan here? What are we trying to get out of understanding this Earth element specifically?
Well, the main goal is to really grasp its core nature within the soul. We need to pin down the traits it's linked with, and maybe more importantly, uncover its unique role.
Unique role, how so?
Its role in taking things that are just possibilities, potential,
Hmm.
and making them actual concrete realities.
Ah, okay, potential to actual.
Exactly. And then we'll explore how its balance, or, imbalance, affects the others. Fire, air, water. The practical side for you, the listener, is understanding how this plays out in your own inner life.
Right, practical insights. Okay, Earth element. Let's really dig in. Quick recap. The framework has 4 elements in the soul: fire, air, water, earth. Got it.
Yep, Kuroko.
So, what characteristics or traits does the source material connect specifically with Earth?
Okay, so according to Rabbi Chaim Vattel, who's cited in the source, Earth is mainly associated with 2 traits, sadness and laziness.
Sadness and laziness. Wow. Okay. Not the most glamorous pair.
Not immediately, no.
So, if fire is about consuming, air about moving, water about sustaining, what's the core job of Earth? What's its force?
The source describes it as the force of establishing, stabilizing, or even shaping. Think of it as what gives things form, makes them solid, grounds them.
Establishing, stabilizing.
The Hebrew terms used are like kof or ko, that kind of force.
Okay, shaping force. That sounds really fundamental. And you mentioned it has a unique perspective, even compared to air, which was also called a root.
Yes, that's a really key distinction the source makes. While air might kick off movement, Earth is called, let me get the phrasing right, the vessel of all.
The vessel of all.
Yeah, in Aramaic, it's not just a root like an origin point. It's more like the container, the foundation, the base on which everything else can stand, and within which things are held and, given shape.
The container. That makes sense visually. Like the actual Earth holds everything. And this seems tied to that central idea you mentioned earlier, potential versus actuality.
Exactly. This is where Earth's critical role really shines. The source explains that fire, air, and water, sort of on their own in the soul, exist mostly in potential.
In potential, like they could happen.
Right. Their capabilities, possibilities, latent energies.
Yeah.
The state is called do-up.
So they're like the ingredients, or maybe the blueprints, possibilities, but not the finished thing yet.
That's a great way to put it. They represent the capacity for passion or movement or
Right.
vitality. But it's the earth element that takes these potentials, these things existing, and, brings them into actuality.
Into actuality.
It pulls them out.
Yeah.
It's a definition, structure, staying power. It turns them from maybe just fleeting impulses into stable, ongoing realities in the soul.
That's quite profound. Can you give us some examples from the source? Make that potential versus actual thing more concrete for the other elements.
Sure. Let's take fire. Potential fire is like having a box of matches. The capacity for fire is there 100%, but it's not actual fire.
Right, just potential.
Actual fire, the source suggests, is like a continuous, steady flame. That stability, the ability for your soul's passion or drive to be this constant, ongoing thing, that consistency comes from the earth element, giving it form, structure.
So without enough earth, my bursts of inspiration or passion might just be sparks. They fizzle out.
Precisely. Or think about air. Air in potential is described as movement that's maybe chaotic, directionless, just following whims.
Flitting about.
Yeah. Moving this way, that way, based on whatever thought pops up or what happens outside. But air, in actuality, is persistent movement. Movement in a specific, chosen direction. Having that stable direction in your goals, your thinking, your actions, that's earth, providing structure for air.
Okay, so the difference between fluttering aimlessly and actually flying somewhere specific, what about water?
Water is vitality, life force, nourishment for the soul. Receiving, say, fleeting bursts of vitality, a quick moment of insight, maybe a temporary boost from something that's water in potential.
Splash.
Kind of. But receiving constant integrated vitality where that life force is truly absorbed deep down becomes a stable part of you. That's water in actuality.
Mm-hmm.
And the ability for that built-in continuous absorption, that comes from Earth.
Wow. So Earth isn't just passive ground. It's actively taking the potential sparks of fire, the urges of air, the flow of water, and it forms them, structures them, makes them stable and continuous.
That's the critical takeaway, yes. The source says Earth gathers, it consolidates, the word is see, the processes of the other elements. And in doing that, it provides stability and structure,
Okay.
which then creates these stable, continuous processes. Just like physical ground is stable and continuous, the earth element in the soul provides that essential foundation. If core is stability, building, structure.
That really clarifies its role. Bedrock and builder. Okay, now, what happens when things go wrong? When this foundation isn't balanced with the others?
Well, like we saw with the others, imbalances happen when one element is excessive or deficient compared to another. Let's look at how earth interacts, maybe starting with fire.
Earth and fire, okay, they seem like opposites, right? Fire wants to go up, earth wants to stay put. Ground things.
Exactly. Fire's nature is to rise, ascend. Earth's is rootedness, stability. So a healthy balance needs both. The desire to grow, to rise,
Yeah.
but while keeping that stability, that firm footing.
Keeping your feet on the ground while reaching up.
Precisely. The source uses a great analogy. You can climb from the ground. You don't fall from the ground. The ground is your essential base for any upward movement.
That's a strong image. So imbalance. What if fire dominates earth? Too much rising, not enough ground?
If fire dominates Earth so, an excessive desire to rise, expand, flourish, but not enough grounding Earth, the person starts, well, losing their grip on reality. The source says, losing their groundness.
So focused on the sky, they forget the earth beneath them, losing touch with practical reality.
Exactly that. The source gives some pretty stark examples. Someone spending their whole paycheck on lottery tickets, driven by this, intense hope.
Right.
Or even more extreme, someone selling their actual home, their physical financial base, to invest in some really high-risk venture overseas, like buying land somewhere distant based purely on a maybe. The desire to flourish is there, but they're literally sacrificing their foundation. The test the source suggests is, what's the absolute worst-case scenario here? If failure means total collapse, losing everything, you're risking your foundation.
That's a very practical, sobering test indeed. Okay, what about the flip side? Earth dominating fire. Too much ground, not enough lift.
If Earth dominates fire and excessive need for stability, for being grounded, just smothers that upward drive of fire, the person becomes kind of paralyzed by fear. They're unwilling to take any risk,
Guess that.
any at all. And that just prevents upward movement, growth, progress.
Like being so scared of falling you never even dare to stand up fully.
Perfectly put. The source paints a picture of constant paralyzing worry. That inner voice saying, well, who can guarantee anything in life anyway? Which is, technically true, but is used to justify staying put, resisting any step that involves even a tiny bit of uncertainty. This fear just stops the growth fire wants.
So how do you find that sweet spot? Rising without losing your base.
Healthy balance means keeping a firm grip on your stable ground, your essential security, your reality, but also being willing to take small, calculated risks. Risks beyond that base.
Calculated risks.
Yeah, risks where even if they fail, your fundamental foundation is still there. You can take the hit without collapsing.
Makes sense. How do you correct these specific imbalances then, if fire is running wild?
If fire dominates and you tend to lose your grounding, the correction is, before you jump into any risky venture, you have to clearly define and really confront the absolute worst possible outcome. If that outcome is total ruin, losing your home, being destitute, the source says avoid it, unless it's completely unavoidable.
Be brutally honest about the worst case.
Yes. And if Earth dominates, trapping you in fear, you need to actively practice taking small, non-ruinous risks. This isn't about suddenly becoming reckless. It's about training the soul.
Training it how?
Training it to desire growth again, and to accept the bit of uncertainty that always comes with moving forward. Start really small. The source suggests something tiny, like buying one lottery ticket, not expecting to win, but as a conscious exercise in taking a tiny risk.
Ah, the practice itself is the point.
Exactly. Then maybe gradually increase the scale, but always make sure that core foundation is safe.
That's very clear, very actionable. Okay, let's shift. Earth and air. Air is movement, change. Earth is rootedness, stability.
Right. The balance here is about being able to move easily when you need to, but also having enough rootedness that you're not just blown around by every little impulse or change in the wind.
So imbalance.
Mm-hmm.
What if air dominates Earth? Too much wind, not enough anchor.
If air dominates Earth, excess movement impulse, overwhelming the need for stability, you get this excessive restless motion. The source calls it hurried restless movement. There's a lack of stability, physically and psychologically.
We're constantly feeling unsettled, always needing to change things up.
Yeah, exactly. The examples are relatable. Someone constantly moving apartments, maybe like 7 times in 5 years.
Wow, that's a lot.
Or frequently changing jobs, careers, cities, even countries, based on fairly minor reasons. Or just this feeling that maybe something better is over there. A real lack of rootedness, always seeking the next thing, the next place.
Always moving, never really landing. What if Earth dominates air? Too much anchor, not enough sail.
If Earth dominates air, you get excessive inertia, resistance to change, a tendency just to stay put. The person becomes overly rigid, immobile.
Stuck.
Like really stuck in a rut, resistant to anything new.
Yes. Examples given are someone staying in a home that's clearly not working, maybe even bad for them, just because, well, this is where I was born or I always lived here.
They might find travel difficult, resist trying new foods, new activities. There's a lack of renewal, stuck in a fixed routine, a fixed job, even if it's unfulfilling. And sometimes they'll have lots of excuses, but deep down, the real reason is just not wanting to move, not wanting change.
So the healthy balance is being rooted but not cemented, able to move intentionally when it's actually needed.
Precisely that. Not easily pushed around by every little thing, but having the inner freedom and ability to move smoothly when the situation calls for it.
How do you help that air-dominated person, the restless one?
The correction there is about making deliberate commitments, conscious decisions to stay put in one place or situation for a defined period. The source uses this phrase, decisions for how long you won't move.
Setting boundaries against the urge to flee.
Exactly. You feel that urge to move, to change, to escape, and you consciously decide, okay, I'm staying with this just a bit longer than feels comfortable. The goal isn't necessarily permanence, but building inner stability by practicing stillness against that pressure.
Grounding the air, okay. And for the earth-dominated person, the one who's rigid.
They need to practice small, conscious changes in routine. It's about gently training the soul to accept movement and newness without feeling overwhelmed.
Gentle nudges.
Yeah, and the examples are wonderfully simple, like buy a different kind of cheese this week, or deliberately walk on the other side of the street, or maybe sit in a different chair at the dinner table for a while.
Huh. Really small things.
Tiny movements, but they break the inertia. They gently challenge those rigid points without being scary or drastic. Find where you're rigid and just gently push against it a tiny bit.
Those examples are so practical, I love it. It's about small disruptions to break patterns. Okay, last pairing. Earth and water. Water is vitality, life force. Earth is absorption, assimilation.
Yes, and a key point here is that Earth absorbs water, unlike fire. Vitality needs to come in, sure, but crucially, it needs to be absorbed, integrated into the soul's substance, not just wash over it.
Okay, so what happens if water dominates Earth? Too much flow, not enough absorption.
When water dominates Earth, you're taking in vitality, learning, experiences, life force, maybe really quickly, but the Earth element isn't able to properly absorb or integrate it. The source says you're failing to grasp it, to take it in.
So the vitality just flows through without sticking.
Pretty much, like drinking from a fire hose or, trying to fill a sieve.
Right.
The source gives the example of someone listening to tons of different lectures or reading book after book, consuming info one after another without pausing to process or absorb the last point before jumping to the next.
Information overload without digestion.
Exactly. It's compared to eating lots of different foods really fast without giving your stomach time to digest anything properly. And the ironic result, often, is actually a greater thirst for vitality because nothing truly satisfies or integrates. It might come from lack of awareness or maybe that restless air element driving a constant need for novelty.
That really hits home. Just consuming isn't enough. You need to digest. What about the opposite? Earth dominating water. Too much dryness.
If Earth dominates water, you get this state of dryness in the soul. The source calls it esho, a parched state. The soul becomes unable or unwilling to receive vitality, life force.
A kind of psychological or spiritual drought?
Yes. The example uses someone so psychologically dry that even genuinely good news doesn't seem to land, doesn't uplift them, it just bounces off.
Wow.
And this state, if it becomes total, where there's just no capacity or desire left to take anything in, is described as very, very difficult to correct. The intake mechanism is essentially shut down.
Wow, that sounds tough. So how do you work towards balancing earth and water?
Well, if water is dominating, you're taking in too much without absorbing the correction. The correction is conscious slowing down. When you receive vitality, whether it's learning something new, having a meaningful experience, whatever,
Hmm.
focus deeply on one thing at a time
One thing.
and allow real time for processing, for assimilation. The source used the phrase to give space, give pause. Don't jump to the next podcast, the next book, the next workshop until the previous one has had a chance to sink in internally. Seek depths before breadth.
Slow down to actually absorb more effectively. Makes sense.
Exactly. Now, for the tougher case, where earth dominates water, the dryness, it's more challenging. If there are any areas left where the person still shows some tiny spark, some capacity or desire to receive vitality, maybe one type of music or nature or one relationship.
A little crack where water could get in.
Kind of. The source suggests trying to gently stimulate and develop those remaining points of connection. But it's honest, if the dryness is total, intervention is extremely difficult.
So wrapping this all together, the main message across all these interactions, especially with Earth, seems to be this crucial need for balance.
Absolutely. The source really hammers this home. A critical first step in any kind of self-work is figuring out your own elemental makeup, identifying your strongest and weakest elements.
Self-awareness first.
Yes, and this process of self-identification, called diagnost, isn't like a one-time quiz. It's a continuous, refining thing throughout life. Because without some clarity on what's dominant or deficient in your soul, how do you know where to focus your energy to make real change? It's incredibly difficult otherwise.
That makes perfect sense. You can't fix what you don't understand about yourself. So this deep dive into Earth, it shows it as this absolutely essential force. Stability, structure, and this amazing power to make potential real. And seeing how it balances or doesn't with fire, air, and water gives us a really useful map for our own inner world.
It really does. It's about starting to recognize these deep elemental patterns playing out inside you, seeing how they show up in your actions, your feelings, your habits, even your struggles.
So as you're listening, maybe reflect on your own life. Where do you see these tendencies? Is there maybe excess fire? Are you prone to those big, risky leaps, maybe losing your footing?
Or maybe excess air. Always feeling restless, needing change, finding it hard to commit or settle down.
Or is it excess water, taking in loads of information, experiences, but feeling like none of it really sticks, really nourishes you?
Or perhaps it's excess earth, feeling rigid, stuck, resistant to new things, maybe even feeling a bit dry or stagnant inside.
The self-awareness, the STEL we mentioned, it really is the crucial first step. It's not about judging yourself, just understanding the forces at play.
And it's not a quick fix, for patterns that might be lifelong, but it's the start of a continuous process, refining, adjusting, growing.
So here's something to think about. How might understanding these fundamental elements, fire, air, water, and especially this grounding earth, actually shift how you see your everyday challenges? Maybe that job hopping isn't just about career goals, but maybe an error thing. Or feeling overwhelmed by learning isn't about intelligence, but about Earth's capacity to absorb water.
Right. How does seeing your inner life through this lens change how you view your choices, your relationships, even just your ability to learn something new?
And consider this. How might those seemingly tiny, mundane choices we talked about, like walking on a different side of the street or trying that new cheese or pausing before the next article, how might they be more than just random actions? Could they be reflections of, and maybe even tools for, gently adjusting these deep elemental balances within your own soul?